What's up everyone, Subterranean here, and today we're going to learn how to make this bass. This is a very gritty type of dubstep bass with a reverb-like sound to it. Basses similar to these have been used by artists like Dubloadz and many others. So, we'll start by initializing our patch in Serum. And we'll get rid of these external effects for now. And we're going to start with our first oscillator, which is going to be a custom wavetable that I made myself called Riddim Table 1. And like always, we'll have a link in the description where you can download this wavetable, and we'll also include the full Ableton project file. Let's tweak with the wavetable position and see if we get a good sound. "75 should work well. Now we'll take our LFO 1, drag it onto the wavetable position, and now we'll play with the modulation and see if we get a good sound. "24 will work well. Now we'll go to our warp menu, we'll turn on bend plus and minus, and let's see if we get a good position with this. We'll put it at 44%. And now we'll take our LFO 1 and modulate the bend plus and minus with it. And now we'll tweak with the modulation here. Nothing too crazy. About 9 will do. Now we'll fire up Oscillator B. We'll set it to be basic shapes under the analog category. And we'll leave the second oscillator on the default wavetable position so we have a plain sine wave. Now we're going to be using frequency modulation with this sound, so like always with these types of basses, we're going to take the level on oscillator A and turn it all the way down. And remember not to turn off the oscillator or else it won't work, just turn the level down. We'll turn our first oscillator up 1 octave. Now we'll go to the warp menu on oscillator B, we'll set it to FM from A, and now let's turn it up and see if we get a sound we like. We'll put it halfway at 50%. Now we'll take our LFO 1, drag it onto the FM from A, and now let's tweak with the modulation. That's really nasty. Let's turn that down a lot. Something nice and subtle at 2. Now we'll turn the level of oscillator B all the way down. We'll throw on LFO 1 to the level. And then we'll turn this down to about 75, so we don't get any clipping. And this is our sound so far. It sounds okay, but it's pretty bland and basic, like you'd hear in a lot of typical dubstep songs. But we're going to spice this up a lot, and the first thing we're going to do that's going to make a huge difference to the sound is we're going to turn on our filter, and we're going to set this to be a reverb filter under the miscellaneous category. This is a huge part in getting that sort of weird pitch modulated reverb sound. Let's take the cutoff of our filter and tweak it and see if we get a nice sound. Almost forgot, we have to send oscillators A and B through the filter. Let's try clicking this little piano button here so the filter is actually in tune with the oscillators. We'll set that to be around 229 or 230 Hertz. Now we're going to take our LFO 2. We'll drag that onto the cutoff. And for our LFO 2 settings, we're actually going to leave this curve on the default, but we're going to set the rate down to 1/2. And we're going to turn trigger on. And now let's play with the modulation on the cutoff. Something nice and subtle. Just a tiny amount at 1. This is what gives the illusion that the synth is actually rising up and down in pitch very subtly. We're not actually modulating the pitch, it's just the reverb filter creating that illusion. Let's play with the resonance and see if we get a nice sound. somewhere around 8% should work. You don't want to turn the resonance up too much or else you get a lot of feedback and it doesn't sound very nice. And before we add on any effects, we're going to go to our LFO 1. And I'm going to load up a preset that I made, the Riddim preset. And then we're going to set our mode to trigger. We'll turn on triplet, and we'll set the rate to be 1/16 triplet. And there's the bass so far. It's a lot better and more distinct now, but it's still not quite there. So we're going to add on some effects. Our first effect is going to be a filter, and we'll drag that all the way up in our effects chain. We're going to set this filter to be a low pass 12. Now let's find a sweet spot with the cutoff. We'll go with 71 Hz. Now we'll take our LFO 1, drag it onto the cutoff. And let's tweak with the modulation and see what we get. I think all the way up at 100 works well, so we're not cutting out too many high frequencies. And now let's take the resonance and increase it up to 3%. Just giving the sound a little bit more squelch, which sounds really nice. Now we're going to load up a hyper dimension. We're going to leave these settings the same, but let's tweak with the mix on the hyper. Something nice and subtle, maybe about 21%. Now we'll tweak with the mix on the dimension. 26% will do. And now we'll do the same thing with the size. 13% will be good. Now we'll throw on a distortion. We'll set this to be a Diode 2, like I do with a lot of my basses. And now we'll tweak with the drive. Don't want to blow out the sound too much, just 17% will be good, and we'll leave the mix all the way up. Our next effect will be a phaser. We'll set the rate and depth down, and we'll modulate the frequency with LFO 2. But before we modulate it, let's try to find a sweet spot with the frequency knob. I think the default of 600 Hz actually works well, no tweaking needed there. Now we'll throw on LFO 2, and we'll tweak with the modulation. 17 will do, and we'll set the mix to something relatively low, maybe about 41%. That works really well. Now we'll throw on a compressor. We'll switch it to be a multiband compressor, and let's turn up the gain. About 6.3 or 6.4 decibels will work well, and we're not going to tweak anything else with this compressor. And that's all for Serum. Now we're going to move on to our external effects. The first effect is going to be a vocoder. We're going to switch the carrier to be a modulator. We'll turn the number of bands up all the way to 40, and we'll increase the frequency range to be 20 Hz to 18 kHz. Now we'll tweak with the depth and see if we get a good sound. About 66% will work well. Now we'll throw on a multiband dynamics, and we'll choose the OTT preset. And we're going to leave most of the controls on the default. We're just going to tweak with these sliders and give the sound a little bit more fullness. Something like that should be good. You don't need to follow these instructions exactly because this isn't super precise. Now we'll throw on an EQ8. We'll change our first band to be a low cut ×4, and we'll set the frequency to be 50 Hz. So we'll cut out some unnecessary low range that the sub bass would be taken care of if you were to actually use this in a song. And now we'll take our fourth band, the high shelf. We'll set this to be somewhere around 5.59 kHz maybe. That'll work well. And now let's increase the gain. I think 5 decibels will be good, and we'll leave the quantize on the default amount. Now we'll throw on a reverb, and like we always do with reverbs on my tutorials, we'll leave high cut on, turn on low cut, and then make a narrow curve like this maybe. turn off the chorus, and we're going to set the decay time to something relatively low. About 696 maybe, we'll just type that in. That's really nice. And now let's decrease the dry wet. We'll go with 28%. And for our last effect, we're going to throw on Clip Shifter, which is a third-party plugin. And if you've seen some of my other tutorials, you may already have this because I use it quite frequently. And we're not going to do much with Clip Shifter. All we're going to do is take the in gain and increase it to 5.78 decibels. And before I play my sound, I'd like to correct one mistake that I actually made in Serum. You may have noticed that this sound has a bit of an inconsistent tone to it whenever I play the bass multiple times. Sometimes it sounds more bassy and sometimes it doesn't. To fix this, we're going to go to our oscillator A. We're going to set the phase all the way to the right to be phase memory. And we'll turn the random all the way down. And we'll do the same thing for oscillator B. And now we have a consistent sound that does not vary. No matter how many times you play it, it sounds the same, and that's what we want. And there we have our sound. So that was my tutorial. I hope you enjoyed it. Please like this video and leave a comment, as it really helps us out. And please subscribe to our channel if you haven't already.